God tested Abraham. So what do you think? Was Abraham being faithful when he reached out his hand, took the knife to kill his son? Did he pass the test? The usual interpretation is, yeah, Abraham passed. He proved his fear of God and he proved his faithfulness, so much so that we even call him the father of our faith. This is Judaism and Islam. But I'm not so sure. I struggle with this story. How about you? Anyone else wrestle and struggle to make sense of it? I think we all do. I can't resolve it for you. I can't wrap it up in a nice, tidy package and say, oh, this is what it means. Now go in peace. Everything's fine. See, I don't think it's as simple as hearing and obeying the voice of God. It never is. After all, more than one murder defendant has said they heard the voice of God tell them to kill another, and no one believes that. The juries don't believe it. I don't believe it. Do you? We just don't. And so I wonder if Abraham failed the test, and that's why the angel intervened at the last minute to stop the killing. Despite my struggle with this story, or maybe because of that struggle, I still think this story has a profound and urgent lesson for us today. Several years ago, I asked my friend Rabbi Joe about this story. I said, Joe, what do you make of this story? How do you deal with it? He says, oh, I don't. I just ignore it. That's not who God is. I said, well, I kind of like that. You know, kind of wish I'd taken Joe's tactic this week. And then he went on to talk about Midrashim, all the stories and commentaries that rabbis throughout the centuries have written, trying to make sense of this text, trying to resolve it and in some way understand it. So apparently Judaism has as much trouble with this text as do you and I. And let me add something here before I go on. I refuse to accept the worn out and heretical argument that there are two gods. The Old Testament God of law and violence, and the New Testament God of grace and peace. And I hope you'll refuse that as well. The God of Abraham is the God of Jesus, is the God of you and me. I do agree with Rabbi Joe, however, that this is not who God is, but it sure seems to be who we are as a people. The late Jonathan Sacks, former chief rabbi of Great Britain, said, we are never more willing to kill than when we do so in the name of God. That's not faithfulness. That's certitude. And what if Abraham is acting out of certitude rather than faithfulness? Because I think there's a fine line between the two, and we often use God, invoke God to give some credibility to our certitude. Certitude is my subjective, absolute conviction about something. There's no self-reflection. There's no conversation with others. And there's certainly no consideration that I might be wrong or mistaken. There's only one way, my way. I know better and more than anyone else. If I think it or believe it, then that settles it. Certitude closes my eyes, my ears, and my heart. And I wonder if certitude is why Abraham never objects, questions, or argues with God. Can you imagine keeping silence in this situation? How can Abraham, who negotiated with God about the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah, not speak a word on behalf of his son, his only son, Isaac, whom he loves? And isn't it interesting that Abraham never tells Sarah what he's up to? You think she might have had something to say about that if he said, hey, Sarah, the boy and I are going to go up here, and this is what's going to happen? You think she would have shared his certitude about that? offered to pack his lunch and help him get ready. Maybe Abraham didn't want to hear what Sarah would have had to say. Certitude usually only wants to hear its own voice. And I can easily imagine that on their way home, Abraham said to Isaac, "Hey, son, let's just keep this between us. There's no need to tell your mom about what happened up there." But neither did he tell the two young men he took with him. Instead, he lied to them. He said, "Y'all stay with the donkey. The boy and I are going to go over here and worship, and then we will come back." But he knew that wasn't in the plan. Maybe he was lying to himself too. Maybe lying to ourselves is one of the ways we maintain our certitude. And it's certainly no surprise that he didn't tell Isaac. If he had spoken out loud what he was planning, everything would have been called into question. Silence and secrecy are the co-conspirators of certitude. And I don't say any of this as a judgment or criticism of Abraham, but in recognition that I too have my certitudes. Ask my wife, she'll tell you. And maybe you have yours. And I wonder what the certitudes are that you and I have and live with today. Certitudes about people, religions, politics, relationships, our lives, how the world should be. See, what if the real test of Abraham isn't whether he would sacrifice his son, but whether he would sacrifice his certitude? What would it be like for you and me to let go of and sacrifice our certitudes? Here's why I think that matters. Every day we see and live with the consequences of certitudes, our own or another's. And it seems to me that certitude is a primary cause of death, injustice, and violence in our lives and our world, whether it's in our personal relationships or our national and global ones. With certitude, we can bomb the world to pieces, absolutely convinced that we're a peacemaker. In our certitude, we say that some lives matter more than others. Some are welcome, but others are not. Some have dignity, but others don't. Certitude polarizes our politics. It prefers monologue to dialogue. It's at the heart of our judgments and our ridicule of others. And I think it leaves us isolated and alone. We no longer have need of anyone else. It hardens our heart. It narrows our vision. And it disconnects us from anything larger than and beyond ourselves. And maybe it was that angelic intervention that saved not only Isaac, but Abraham from Abraham's certitude. And maybe we all need to be saved from our certitude. Did you know that after today's near sacrifice of Isaac, Holy Scripture never records God as having spoken to Abraham again? Not once. And what if that was the beginning of Abraham's real faith? What if that's why we can call him the father of our faith? What if Abraham left behind his certitude on that mountain when he came home? Faithfulness without certitude. What do you think? Could we do that? And what would it take? Faithfulness without certitude just might give God something to work with. Make space and room for God to show up. And we just might discover, as did Abraham, that the Lord really does provide. really does.